Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Can't Speak, Rebellious Wellness Lifestyle. And today, my guest is Sandy Kruse, somebody that I've been stalking on the interwebs, reading her really great writing. She is a kindred spirit. She's a rebellious health advocate in Canada, but her main audience for her podcast is here in America. You may know her name. She's got quite a following. She's on Instagram and YouTube, and her podcast. You've been doing, how long is the podcast? 7
I
years?
hit five
Five.
it was 5 in February, but I've been active for about 8 years now in this
Wow.
wellness space.
That's a lot of years in this wellness space to still be here. Oh, so many fads. Anyway, Sandy, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Greg. I know you and then I sent you a little message today because I'm like, oh, I got to follow her back
Oh,
because I feel definitely drawn to you and your purpose. And I'm really excited to be here.
why don't we, thank you. And why don't we start by telling people who you are? What do you do?
So I'm actually a registered holistic nutritionist. I went back to college at age 46. I'm now 55. And I decided to go back to college because it's that whole hero's journey.
Hmm.
When I was 40, my 5-year-old daughter at the time had been diagnosed with a tumor, a malignant tumor, cancer, the soft tissue sarcoma. And exactly 1 year after that, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And interestingly enough, her and I had her second surgery, my first one to remove my thyroid gland, 1 year apart to the month.
Oh, wow.
So that was 2010 and 2011. And then 1 year after that, my husband actually coded in hospital from a bacterial pneumonia.
Oh, dear.
So 3 years of this, I'm going to call it a snowball effect of health crises. And prior to that, I've had both my parents have had cancer. My mom had non Hodgkin's lymphoma. She's now going to be 79, by the way. She was 52. It led me on this path. I was first absolutely in that victim consciousness, why me mode. What do I do? What's the point of all this? I started two websites, one to advocate for other parents to help understand more about the specific soft tissue sarcoma that is often misdiagnosed. And then I started another website. So I was writing and blogging
Mm.
way back when. And then I was like, I had to do more after I had my thyroid gland removed. And I was told, here you go, T4 only,
Mhm.
Synthroid, you're going to be fine. And I wasn't. I had a lot of issues with energy, but I also had infections that wouldn't heal,
Mm.
stuff that I'm not even going to talk about here because it was really, I did talk about it on one podcast. And so that led me on this journey. Once I started to feel well, I started researching how can I feel better? What's going on with me? Why did this happen? They told me I was going to be fine after I had my thyroid out, and I'm not fine. What's wrong with me? I started seeing gastroenterologists. I started to have, and I call it this cascade, and it happens to a lot of women
Mm.
around midlife.
Mm.
And it just so happened that I also had the master gland removed. I went back to college at 46. I graduated. It took me 3 years instead of two, busy with kids and stuff. I graduated at 49 and started Sandy K Nutrition and then started my podcast very shortly after because my husband and I sat down. He's, you know what? Yeah, you're a nutritionist, but you don't just talk about nutrition. It's never just about the food. It's about body, mind, spirit, soul. So it's more about the holistic, and I like it
Mhm.
WHOLE versus just the nutrition, although
Yeah,
nutrition is a big part. So that's
absolutely.
my story in a nutshell, Greg.
My story in a nutshell. That's quite a big nut shell.
Yes, yes.
And one of the things, one of the places that we intersect is this idea of the wholeness. It's so many, our whole system, I think Canada's the same, medical system, nutrition, such as it is, FDA, the food pyramid, or plate, whatever the heck it is, everything is designed to take us apart. and deal with a part of us, a heart, a liver, a thyroid. It's not a systemic functional medicine, yes. Now, there are more ways for doctors to get educated on the whole body and use that. But I still think that people think if I don't feel well, I need to see my doctor. And if the doctor doesn't have a diagnosis, he's going to take his next best guess. You also educate in that way. You can talk about the thyroid, yes, but you're going to talk to the person about what that master gland, as you say, really does for the body and how each of those things on their own needs support. So I think that's what makes you different. That's why I have all different kinds of guests on this podcast, because if somebody hears one thing that you said that resonated for them, and it was about soul or woo or thyroid, that's great. That's a place for them to start exploring more of this holistic idea.
Exactly. It's about resonance too. So it's about looking at the body as a whole because, like you said, we are conditioned to believe that the body works in silo and the body doesn't work that way. So, what caused thyroid dysfunction wasn't just one thing,
Right.
it's a multitude of things. I
Mhm.
know I was a stressed out mom, and I can still remember, Greg, after giving birth to my second child, that's likely when things started to go awry, but I wasn't paying attention
Mm.
to the symptoms.
Mm.
And I can look back in hindsight and go, oh, yeah, I had
Mhm.
postpartum thyroiditis way back when I was 35, but
Wow.
that was missed. And all of the doctor's visits were about the baby and next
Mm.
vaccinations and this and that. Never mind what's going on with the mom and that she had a husband that traveled almost weekly, and I was alone with a toddler and a newborn. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
my cortisol was here and
Mm.
it didn't come down.
Right.
That's the best way to describe it because cortisol going up and down is very good and normal. But when it stays here, that's when it can affect thyroid function. I was like, so skinny after the birth of my second child, and I didn't have enough breast milk. And so there were all these signs, but I didn't pay attention. I wasn't taught to.
I was
So
going to say you
just
didn't. Yeah.
yeah, but just like what you and I are, whatever it is that we speak about, if one thing stands out in somebody's mind and it can make a difference in somebody's wellness, that's a win. Because
Mhm.
I don't consider myself an expert in anything. I consider myself an advocate for wellness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's expertise is a thing for sure. I'm sure you are an expert in certain things, and especially the things that you have experienced and corrected so that you could have a healthy life. And we're also really good consumers and parsers of information, what to trust, where to get it, that kind of thing. So, where do you go for information when you just feel like this is something new for me? I didn't know that, I don't know, pick an organ. I didn't know that the heart could be affected by a lack of magnesium, for instance. Where do you start when you want to research something like that?
Here's the thing. I used to use specific research like examine.com and all of these different resources for research. Now, I'm going to be honest. ChatGPT can provide a lot of that.
Yeah.
What's really interesting, somebody asked me, they DM'd me on Instagram. They're like, "What do you think of AI? Do you use it?" And I said, "Yes, I do. However, you need to really understand the topic up here to use it properly." Because it's just, if you were to ask my husband about do some research on heart disease, he wouldn't even know how to navigate on the right questions to ask.
Mhm.
So I do think that AI is good to use as a resource, but you've got to have some knowledge in health and wellness to really be able to navigate and get the research that you want and need as a reliable source. Like I test it all the time. All the time. I'll ask something, let's say we're talking about heart disease. I'll ask about heart disease, and then they'll send something, and I'll be like, are you sure that is a reliable resource? And then they'll come back and they'll go, oh, maybe not. Here's something else.
I know. I
Right?
always ask for citations, especially when I work with this genetics company. Genetics and biochemistry is not my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot in 2 years. However, I always say, we're going to write about this gene. Can you relate this to heart disease, for instance? And I want the citations. It makes it that much faster for me because if one of the citations is, God forbid, I'm going to say his name, Dr. Oz, you know what? I'm going to skip that citation. I'm going to look for other ones that might be a little bit more reliable.
So for people who are not in the wellness space, I understand why you may rely on certain individuals to provide the research for you. However, one thing I always say, and you probably see this too, is that you almost have to pick a side in a lot of things. And you'll say, okay, I'm going to show all this research to support my point right here. But over here, you're going to find research that's going to negate it too.
Totally.
So this is when, Greg, you and I talk about it. You got to turn inward. You got to know yourself. You got to know what resonates with you. I think genetics are important to understand, at least on a high level.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to do that. And what does your intuition say?
I just was with a girlfriend yesterday who I've known for 50 years, and she went to a doctor. And I said, how was the experience? And I said, I wish I'd listened to my gut. I really didn't even want to go there to that person, but I went because I'd made the appointment and the thing. So she wasted basically, she wasn't going to see this person again, but she wasted all that time just because she got this weird feeling as soon as she hung up the phone after the appointment. But she went. So that's a very innocuous example. Nothing bad happened. But there are times when we disavow what's happening, what our intuition is saying. Oh, that's nothing. And I especially love this. This is what happens at our age.
Mm.
This is how we should feel. And we get
So
told that. It's not just
we
in our heads. We get told that by people in the medical world.
we absolutely do. And I think having somebody who's an advocate for you as well. And I wrote about this, Greg. I wrote about how I almost feel like we need to go back to some of the old ways, but not exactly, if that makes sense, where we have our practitioners who know us.
Right.
I
Yeah.
will say that my husband's doctor is incredible, but his wheelhouse is medicine, not the holistic side.
Mhm.
So my husband's a lucky man. He's got him for the medical side, and then he's got me in the background saying, okay, you need to take this to offset this. You need to make
Mhm.
sure you do this because this depletes this. Eat this way. I cook every day. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Same
Yeah.
thing with my mom. Like my mom and my dad, although my dad's, oh, I don't want to take so many supplements. And I'm like, Dad, you have to because you're like, he's going to be 88
Oh, wow.
and this month. And so I'm like, listen, do this. This is going to help. But it's like you need to have these, whether it's even some practitioners that are online that you know and trust are good. Having a physician that's your best health advocate that wants the best for you, having an osteopath, having maybe a Chinese medicine doctor, having a chiropractor. It's like you have your team, right? That know
Mhm.
you.
Mhm. I think that's really important. And unfortunately, some people are in our country are blocked from that kind of care because of the insurance. Many times, insurance won't even pay for a chiropractor, a DO maybe, certainly not a nutritionist, that kind of thing, which is a shame because, of course, that leaves out a large segment of the population who's already spending a lot on insurance, but then they can't go to the practitioners they want. So they are left to be dealt with by doctors who love to give medications. And medication, I don't have a problem with medications when they're needed, but I don't think they're needed as often as they're given.
That I agree with. That I agree with because I actually wrote about how I feel like I was, you know, how doctors are, they're supposed to take a do no harm.
Mm,
I felt like I was harmed when I
mm,
had my thyroid out because I was put on medication. unnecessarily. That was a drug. It's a proton pump inhibitor to reduce the
Oh,
gas,
wow.
the acid, sorry, in your stomach. And I didn't even have heartburn. And now while I've been able through diet, lifestyle, all the things, I actually falsify my digestion. That's probably how I prevented becoming anemic in my 40s when I had extremely heavy periods. And I would take tons, like 1,800 to 2,000 milligrams of pure hydrochloric acid, along with a digestive enzyme. And then I slowly weaned down off of it. But what happens with some drugs is there's a rebound effect when you
Hmm.
try and go off of it. And that's massive. Proton pump inhibitors and acid reducers are one of the biggest prescribed drugs, along
Hmm.
with statins.
Yeah. And often they go hand in hand. I could do a whole thing. I had a doctor he's a SIBO guy. He takes care of people's digestion, and he he talked about the proton pump inhibitors and how much damage they do. Not to mention that your body will then stop producing acid, which you really actually do need. But there are a lot of other complications that I don't remember at this time. But anybody listening, do a little research on those if you're taking them. And no shame, no guilt that you're taking them. You were told that's what you needed to not get heartburn or GERD and sleep better, et cetera.
And I didn't even have it though. Remember,
No,
I
that's so
didn't even
weird.
have it. So there were other things that were going on with me after I had my thyroid removed. And they assumed it was because of too much stomach acid.
Hmm.
And then I was told that I can't go off of these because I'm at risk for esophageal cancer. So that's when the fear comes in. And I had signs and inflammation of Barrett's esophagus. So this is a long, arduous journey.
Yeah. Let's talk
But
about social influencers and what we should be looking for in terms of who we trust, or how do we even know whether any influencer out there is worth trusting? Because I know this is a
so
thing of yours. That's why I'm asking. It's not out
it
of curiosity.
is. It is a thing of mine over the last year because what has happened to me is I felt like I've had to pull away from certain energies in the industry, certain terms, certain terminology, conferences, like a lot of things, because I felt an ick. And that's the best way to describe it. And while many people are very well intended when they start in this industry, it's like a tainting that can happen. And what happens is the greed, the money, the power, all of that comes into play. And people who are watching, what bothers me the most is, let's say I'm Sandy Kruse, I'm not in the industry, I'm not in any kind of wellness space, and I am watching to learn. Almost every message that comes from a lot of these experts, this is why I don't like the term expert anymore either. Even though some people may be experts, I don't like to use the term because it goes hand in hand with this ability to buy your expertise,
Hmm.
which today, perfect example, there's this article that just came out on FeedSpot. And I was actually shocked, Greg, because they named my podcast in the top 20 for holistic podcasts.
Wow, congratulations.
I never paid a penny for it, though. That's why I was shocked. So, what has happened is really no different than big pharma in a lot
Hmm.
of ways, in that if you don't have the money, honey, you ain't going to be on the spotlight or on the stage. And some people, they're, how would I say this? I'm trying to say it as eloquently as possible. Their motivation is to be on stage. Their motivation is to be the power, the expert. And that's no different than big pharma for me. Greed,
Hmm.
money, power. And when somebody is speaking something to an audience that really trusts them, transparency and integrity are number one, and number two when you're talking about somebody's health, not what you're getting paid for over here or what you're paying for to be able to say what you're saying.
Mm.
So there's a very, very large documentary coming out. I'm not going to even name it, but I also know for a fact that the majority of people would have paid anywhere around $30,000 US to be called experts in this documentary. I'm like,
Mm.
okay, but hold on a second. Let's go back here. If you're really sought after as somebody who's done some incredible work in a space, and you really are an expert, a true expert, why do you have to pay to be called an expert? So, like, I can go into, like, I've gone down many rabbit holes, even down to podcasters that are charging money for guests to speak, which even people like Joe Rogan, who, like, I think he's like the most no bullshit podcaster, and he does a lot of stuff on wellness. He won't charge money. Neither does Diary of a CEO, who has amazing guests. They don't charge money. So why would you? Where is the integrity in that?
Mm.
Okay, so Greg, if you pay me 20 grand and you have really not that much to offer, but you're going to look really good on my podcast, do you see what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's just as soon as there's too much money tied into this, it can get very ick and you don't know who to trust. And the bottom line is the people who are following, the people who are listening, the people who are trying to learn to understand their wellness, they're the ones who are going to suffer because they don't know if it's coming from true, honest heart and belief or if it's coming from getting paid.
The other thing that I find and how I filter through guests, potential guests, if somebody is selling a product, great. If they have no content, nothing, they come up with three questions. Oh, you can ask me this, that, and the other. But it's always about the product, and that's the whole vibe. I'm not, that's not for me. And I would say for listeners, if you go and you see an ad for a product, you think, oh, look at all the testimonials and it looks great. Check out their website. What else is there? What is the background of the people that put this product together? What other kind of information can they give you to understand how the product might work for you? And of course, there's no one thing fits all for everybody. But again, and you talk about personal responsibility. We have to do some, we have to take the time, invest in ourselves to look at these companies and these products rather than just going on the big influencer or the big marketing budget or the cute little website photos and just buy something. Okay, I'm a little guilty with beauty products. I have bought some stuff where I didn't research, but I have a
Don't we
cabinet
all?
full of
Don't
things
we
that are
all?
not used. Okay, good. I'm not alone, Sandy. But really, when it comes to your health, people do some research.
Here's the other little caveat to that where it gets very tricky. You may not be able to know. So, this is why I'm always like full transparency. As an example, I work with a company called Quicksilver Scientific, meaning I'm an affiliate of theirs. I'm an affiliate of some companies. I use their estriol on my face. I believe in their products and their quality. And I always say I am affiliated with them. So what bothers me the most is when it's kept under the rug
Mm.
where people don't really know. So a good example is there's a company that I am affiliated with and I know somebody. So this is a good example. I'm not going to use names. I don't need any kind of lawsuit. However, I do know of a company that I work with that does pay well to affiliates. I have actually heard the words come out of other podcasters' mouths. I don't get it. I really don't get the product. I don't get it.
Mm.
And yet they'll go behind my back and say, use my code, not
Mm.
Sandy's. Do you
Interesting.
see what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
So the person who is watching that reel on Instagram or that ad or whatever it is, they don't know that. So I've had people ask me the question, who do I trust then? Who do I trust? I'm like, you. Do you resonate with this? You got to go back in. And I think the problem, even in this day of information, everybody's going out, like
Mhm.
pulling from all angles instead of getting quiet and going, okay, does this make sense for me? I have a lot of different ways in which I test my intuition, and I've done a lot of shows on that. But I think, have you heard of the movie Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds?
No.
It's quite old, and you could tell it's like low budget
Yeah.
documentary. But really, it goes back to that whole we've gotten away from tapping into our own inner wisdom that we
Mhm.
all innately have because everything is external. So that's my answer. Always, whenever somebody goes, well, who do you trust? I'm like, you trust yourself, nobody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, and I think we downplay our own inner wisdom. We, as a collective group of women at any age, and if we had never been good at trusting ourselves before, by the time we're 50, 60, now we're really like, I look at what I did when I was in my 30s, or look at that person that I was in a relationship with. That was stupid. But you just got to clear out all that noise and really give it a chance, right? Give your own inner wisdom a chance to come out.
Yeah. And I will say the biggest blocker of that inner wisdom is, though there's a few, one is fear. So I've been there before where you're scared shitless because you just got a diagnosis or you've got a really scary symptom and your doctor's doing all these investigative tests. And fear can really blur that inner wisdom and what feels right. And I've been there and it's not great. And it's also not easy. And there's nothing more scary than having your child sick. That I
Oh
will say.
gosh, yeah, I can't imagine.
And my whole theory is that I maybe always had thyroid issues, but it was that stress
Hmm.
that changed one of the nodules cellular structure from benign nodule to a cancerous nodule. Anyway, so fear can be very nasty, but then
Oh,
also never being quiet. So I do think that while the advent of social media and AI and all that is all very exciting and there could be a lot of good that comes out of it, I also think it makes our brains never want to just rest and be quiet. I don't know
hmm,
about you, Greg. I have a dog. I make sure once a day I walk her in nature, never with headphones.
hmm.
Never. It drives me crazy when I see people walking in or jogging in a forest intensely with their music blaring. I'm like, you're in a forest. Take those out and walk and be and watch and pay attention and get quiet and listen to the messages that nature gives us. Those are two major reasons why we've lost touch of who we are and what we want and what we need. It
Hmm.
feels good.
Very noisy out there. And it is very tempting to just roll with it. I'm a news junkie, I'll admit it. I it's not the best time of life in this country to be a news junkie, but I have learned to not have it be real. If things are happening, oh, what happened today? Stock market went down, stock market went up. Somebody did this, somebody signed a paper, somebody shared a thing on Signal. I just take it and let it roll through. It's like information, interesting. It is my country. And but I don't spend a lot of time there. I spend more time doing research or reading or writing or being outside in nature, gardening, as I said, at this time of year. And I used to read or listen to a book on Audible when I was gardening. If it's tedious, like weeding, I will. But if I'm with my roses or beautiful vegetables, or I don't listen to anything except the bees, the bugs that come by, the what the flowers and plants want to tell me. That sounds too woo for some people, I'm sure, but I believe it.
Oh, I love it. I love the woo because I actually, one day, there are these trees. I know it sounds weird. I'll walk through the forest, and one day I actually took a video of the trees because it looks like and I was like pondering some stuff. Like I'm a big thinker, And I looked up and I'm like, oh my God, it's like these trees have eyes.
Mm,
They're watching and they're listening and they're paying attention. I know it sounds woo, but I think that I, I come from Eastern European farmers. My parents are both from old country Croatia farmers, and they talk to me a lot about life, how it
mhm,
used to be. And maybe that's why I'm so interested in it. And even balanced eating. And I'm seeing these doctors now, experts, saying everybody needs to have 50 grams of protein at every meal. And I'm like, no, they don't. Not everybody needs that.
right.
Maybe if you're a bodybuilder or if, and so these blanket statements, and sometimes they come across as fearful too. If you don't do this, you're at risk for dementia and osteoporosis and all these things. And even the wellness space, the holistic or alternative, can have that little fear
Hmm.
underneath everything. You got to be, the bottom line is you got to be able to tap into yourself and go back living in this modern world, but still go back to some of the old ways of doing things to have a balanced life, because it's highly unbalanced now the way we live.
Hmm. And I think, tell me if you agree. I think at a certain age, it could be any age for anybody, but let's just say we're at midlife beyond. When we think about the old ways, like before there was biohacking, before there was ground up protein to make shakes with, before, what did you eat and how did you feel? And as we age, I don't know about you, Sandy, but my body now just rejects certain things flat out. I
Totally.
could not go to a Chinese restaurant and I would enjoy it, but I would feel terrible within an hour. It's just too much salt, too much whatever. And so that's also an awareness. That's also your body talking to you. So to your point, how were you doing okay before all these other things came along? And then how do you honestly feel when you eat something? It can be pretty simple. If butter on a biscuit tastes good to you and it doesn't taste good to your sister, have your butter on your biscuit and she won't. It's not any one prescription of eating.
I agree. And that's why I'm not. So when I was working with clients, I didn't do a lot of these severe elimination diets or AIP. Like if somebody had an autoimmune disease, I would just say, cut out gluten, cut out dairy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And eat whole foods. I didn't do diets because I found women just got more stressed out. And if they didn't align with it, meaning internally, it probably didn't do much for their health anyway.
People can't maintain something they find awful.
And I do think that as we age, we have to change with the times. Like, for example, what I ate at 40 is different than what I can eat at 55. You're probably going to find this funny. Everyone's, oh, intermittent fasting. Yeah, everybody needs to intermittent fast. I became insulin resistant while I was doing 16/8,
Hmm.
listening to one of the experts, a 16/8 intermittent fast. So that means 16 hours of not eating, 8-hour window of eating. I became insulin resistant. And that was the first year I went from 12 periods down to only 4 that year. So I was in the later stages of perimenopause and I became insulin resistant. And people are like, what? Intermittent fasting is the fix for everything. And so I'm like, no, I'm living proof because my HbA1c went up to 6.1 while I was doing that. And so what I was doing was I was listening to an expert, not listening to my body. So I'm a big believer that we're not meant to graze all day. I'm a big believer in doing an overnight fast, 12 hours or whatever. I think that's very healthy. On occasion, you might want to do a longer fast for whatever reason, but doing that day in and day out for, let's say, a menopausal woman, it could cause her more stress.
Hmm.
And then she sits there in that 8-hour window and eats. So
Everything.
right, because you're so stressed out by not being allowed to eat for 16 hours. This is why I'm like, I've really changed. I did the keto diet. I did every diet after I lost my thyroid gland, honestly. I even almost went vegetarian. And then I settled on balance. As soon as I do something with balance, meaning I'm not terrified of bread, I'm not terrified of carbs, then I'm doing well, doing
Yeah.
okay.
I went for years without eating a carrot or a potato because I got freaked out after the whichever first South Beach or something. And I was perimenopausal. I was getting the muffin top, but I was really active. I couldn't understand it. And then somebody said, cut out carbs. That was it for me. Cut out carbs. Everything worked for a while. And then I just realized how crazy it was. Like I was literally crazed about it, which is, I still drank wine. So I obviously had my little things that I would do and discount how many carbs were in the glass of wine. And sometimes with friends, I'd eat chips, but that would be once in months. And then it just became untenable. I just, like you said, you're not afraid of bread. I was totally afraid of bread for the longest time. And I realized that the way for me to have a healthy life was to have what I enjoy, because enjoyment is a huge portion of health. If we're
I,
constantly in deprivation mode, we're not completely healthy.
yeah. And I think that if you look at, I always try and look at my parents. Can't live like farmers, but I look at them. I look at how people ate Mediterranean style because it's a mix of everything.
Yeah,
I look at the blue zones. I look at all those things. And really, the biggest thing is try and get closest to your food as you possibly can.
yeah.
I wish I could have a garden, but I can't.
Can you buy good garden produce somewhere nearby?
I go to farmers markets
Yeah,
all
so
season long.
yeah, you have that.
Yes. Yeah, I would much rather buy a non-organic strawberry from a local farmer than go and buy an organic strawberry all the way from California to Toronto that was shipped, picked early, shipped, and all of that. Because there's something to be said. I did a podcast on this, Greg. I don't know if you've ever explored this about the energy of the food that you eat.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I think there's really something to it. And even energy when you're eating. It's just, you know how they say, if you it really has nothing to do with religion, but whatever it is that you believe in, if you do something that's with intent or you pray or something, it brings a really good energy to the food that you're going to eat. It's going to be more nourishing. There's more and more research coming out about energy and
Hmm.
vibration and how real it is.
Yeah. And you were talking about how weird it sounds that you saw the trees had eyes and they were listening or looking. And I was watching a documentary on Gaia about many people listening to this will have seen something about how the trees talk through the networks and the mycelium underneath and the mushrooms. This went even further, and they interviewed a Canadian who had started out as a marine biologist. And then when she realized her energy on a bad day, like if she knew she had to do something that might stress out the fish, they wouldn't come near her. And she realized on days when she was in a great mood and she was going to do something lovely for them or whatever, watch them, they would just come and float around with. She said, it changed my life. I couldn't any longer just be in the sea with this idea. I wanted to be in the whole world, understanding the energy. And she talks about how trees will move, no wind, no nothing, but they will move in certain ways depending on what's happening around them. Or if 100 miles away, they're logging a forest in this country, the hundreds mile away trees will start to put out extra nutrition into the roots for the baby tree. It's incredible. And I totally believe that's all true. So you can say about them seeing you, I believe it. Maybe I'm
Yeah, I
crazy.
do too. I do too. But I also look at signs that probably nobody else would look at, and a lot of people would just chalk it up to, oh, that's coincidence. Whereas I don't.
Mhm.
I feel like I get little signs from my aunt who was like a second mom to me when I was
Mm,
little, who passed away quite a few years ago now, but I look for guidance in that way. I believe that we have people who look out for us. I also believe that things happen for a reason,
mhm.
shitty as they can be.
Yeah,
There's a reason because I wouldn't be here today had it not been for all the shitty stuff that happened before.
indeed. Let's tell people where they can find you. Sandy K Nutrition.ca, the lovely country of Canada. I hope you don't hate us, Sandy.
I don't hate anybody unless
Don't.
they're real assholes, but
Okay, there's a few people, all right. And I bet you
no,
they're in the
actually,
ick industry.
it's more ick, and it's more if I don't really care. You do whatever you want to do as long as you don't do anything to me or my family, because then the mama bear comes out, though.
And it should, it
Yeah.
should.
Um,
So you, just so people know, Sandy K Nutrition, where they can also find your podcast, they can link to your podcast, but the name of your podcast is not Sandy K, is it?
the name of my podcast is Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. And by the
She
way,
is a queen.
yeah, you know what? I remember somebody said to me, "Oh, you maybe shouldn't be using the term queen because queen means something else," which I'm not going to get into and I'm like, "What? I am a queen. Like, I've lived, I'm 55 years old. I deserve that and I'm keeping it and I don't care who gets offended by it.
Good
I'm
for
a Gen
you.
X baby." Yes, so that's the podcast. It's available everywhere. The best podcast to find out where to listen is sandykruse.ca.
Okay.
Sandyknutrition.ca was my nutrition website,
Okay.
which I don't really see clients much anymore at all, one on one for now anyway. But Sandy Kruse,
Okay.
SandyKruse.ca is probably the best place to find out my podcast. And it's just Sandy K Nutrition everywhere else. And I do write on Substack as well.
And she gets a little fiery, people.
Ah, oh, you've dug in a little bit?
Of course, I think that's how I found you. I don't know. Maybe it was Podmatch, but I feel like I had already seen you on YouTube or Substack or something, and here we are. Anyway.
Definitely fiery on Substack. I have been more tamed in order to stay on YouTube. Let's just say,
Mhm.
you know how that is.
We've had podcasts taken down for
Me
the
too.
genetics woman that I write for. Just
Me
for
too.
mentioning, just for mentioning, this was a couple of years ago, but it was something about vaccines because that was during the COVID time. Took it down. There wasn't even an opinion. It was simply a statement that these things, these vaccines had X, Y, and Z in them, and it was gone. So we're very careful now.
Yes. And so this kind of goes to the whole point of being careful about where you're getting your information from, what
Hmm.
is curated for you to see. And the one thing I will also say, there are, when this is a really important point we didn't touch on. And I think it's so important, Greg. People will base their opinion on wellness experts based on their following. But what people don't understand is that anybody can hire a service and go from 5,000 followers to 50,000 followers in 2 weeks. So I just want to make sure, because we touched on so many different things, but really it's helping people curate information because there's so much of it out there to curate it for themselves and what resonates for you. And of
Hmm.
course, you got to look at the person. Does
Yeah,
that person resonate with you, or do they make you feel fearful or guilty or not good about yourself or whatever it is? A lot of times it's like we're getting scolded as well in our health
right.
and
We're
wellness.
getting shamed if we're not powerlifting at whatever age, or eating all the protein, or doing the green drinks and the,
Yes.
yeah.
And those people, I have to say this. I'm sorry. I know we have to go. Can I say this? Do we have time?
Oh, of course.
I was at a conference and first of all, I spoke about my journey to wellness. I was lecturing. This was back in 2022, and I had quite a bit of woo in there. And one of the doctors that was sitting beside me, she's a lovely person. She looked at me. She goes, "I have no idea what the hell you're talking about when you talk about crystals and all that woo stuff, but I like you and you're a nice person, so I'll support you." I'm like, "Okay." And then I was told to go and grab a meat stick for lunch. And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I'm fucking starving. You're telling me my lunch is going to be this meat stick?" And this is at this big wellness conference where people are supposed to be so healthy. And I'm like, this is so unhealthy and
Wow.
unbalanced. And I'm like, so I wanted to put those little stories in there because what it looks like on Instagram or Facebook or wherever may not be the reality. It
Mhm.
might, but it might not.
Eyes open,
Eyes open. Yes.
intuition in gear. This
Feisty
is,
today. Sorry.
oh, I didn't really want you because I thought you'd be a retiring little wallflower. I wanted the feisty.
You got it. You
I
got
got
it.
it. I got it. Thank you so much for your time, oh, wait, I'm not going to call you an expertise. Thank you for your time and all of the ways that you bring passion to the wellness industry and community and to all of us listening.
Thank you, Greg. I'm so grateful to have met you. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. People, I'll be back next week with another fabulous guest. Be well till then.